We have a very special project we're presenting here. Beautiful application video showing a Microcement spa in Surrey, British Columbia. As you can see here, this is how the project started. Not looking like much, just a base concrete floor there, no waterproofing in the shower, nothing kind of happening. This is the final results of the project, the Microcement wall and shower system. We've got it in the showers there. All the stone is installed and looking beautiful. We also have the Microcement floor system that we're going to show there as well. That's a beautiful spa inside of a house downstairs, and that's a saltwater hot tub actually. There's no chlorine in that. The salt and the chlorine can definitely wear away at your water-based sealers, so as usual we're using the oil-based high wear sealer with part C, and that mats the product down quite a bit. You can see it has a decent shine, but it's not extremely glossy. If you look straight on, it's quite matte, as you can see inside the shower here. All of the caulking is done with a Mapei color matched silicone. We use the sanded inside the shower and the other areas near the hot tub where it's going to take quite a lot more abuse. We ensured that we did not use the sanded version, so it's a little bit shinier in there. But you can't see the caulking, and with most colors with the Mapei series you can always find a silicone to match. Depending on the lighting here, you can see it will make the product look a little bit more yellow, but it's just the particular lighting or even the camera itself. This is our wall and shower fine on the walls, and then the Microcement floor fine for the spa floor. We sealed it with PolySeal, Poly WB, and then the high wear, and that's outlined in the application guide. We'll start to show the prep very soon. So here's how the project started off. Not a lot to work with. The builder did install the initial waterproofing as we recommend the Ardex 8+9. There's also some red guard on the ceiling there, but we ensured to go over top of that as well. We had to sand the 8+9. I'm not sure why, but a lot of installers will install that product. It will have some bumps and lumps and different things that might poke through, so we usually sand it down and then just do one more fine coat rolled on after. Sanding the 8+9 works very well, as you can see in the video there. Because this is a spa, we had them install an uncoupling membrane on the floor for the poured cement to protect from any cracks, and then they poured the Ardex K60 as we recommend to about 1/2 an inch thickness. We then had Will go around all of the corners there to protect from cracking since your walls and floor connect, and we installed the Ardex waterproofing tape with the 8+9 around all the edges, as you can see there. The floor as well, you want to make sure that you prime, so we watered down Ardex P51. You could also water down our quartz primer as well, either or. Sometimes we use the quartz primer, sometimes we use P51, just depends on the day and kind of my system that I'm developing. But in that particular case, we primed the whole floor with 2 coats of the P51, one layer diluted 1:1, and then one full strength layer. We also primed all of the drywall. As you can see there, all that drywall there looks a little bit wet now, so it all has one layer of a diluted Ardex P51. If you use drywall primer, the drywall primer is too thick and generally sits on the surface, and you're not going to have kind of a permanent bond to the walls. So for any technical areas, fireplaces, floors, showers, never allow them to use drywall primer. Always prime yourself, either with our diluted quartz primer or with Ardex P51. We also primed all of the walls and the ceilings with 1 coat of our quartz primer as well. And now we're just starting to lay down the first base coat wall and shower on the ceilings. Our base coats for the floors and the ceilings are all now, we have a new fiber technology that kind of bursts into millions of different fibers and reinforces the whole product. It also provides a lot more rheology and thickness and body to the product as well. This has greatly enhanced the strength and workability of our plasters, and we're always adding new things into them in order to make our products better for you and for the customers, and also for all of our beautiful installs. The base coat here we've covered many times. It's no different than our other videos, just a larger scale of work. I might write down in the description as well how we broke this project out in order to complete it in the recommended time frame, which I believe we took about 12 or 13 days start to finish. You really have to plan your days out perfectly in order to have each amount of work completed in each day, else you can lose a lot of time and money on these projects. That wall there is all reinforced as well in behind that stone to protect from any flexing, and then we taped all around right where it met that stone and put more Ardex 8+9 there. There's the first coat of base coat. You can see it's quite sandy, but we're not having a lot of ridges and lines and things like that. We're always using the flexible base coat trowel, and that really helps to protect from getting a lot of lines and ridges and makes the application very smooth and very easy as well. So we finished this ceiling. The way that I organized this project is we did all the prep and then did 2 layers on the ceiling. So that's 2 base coats on the ceiling now that they're finished. And now we're turning our attention to the walls. We've got all that mesh around there because all those little dials, those screws are going to take quite a bit of flexion and movement as they put the shower heads on there. As well, anywhere if kids are sitting and pushing against that wall, you want some extra mesh there. So we added all that mesh over top of the waterproofing to embed into the first base coat, just to ensure we've done our part in protecting for cracks there. A lot of people and systems in Italy, they will mesh all the ceilings, the walls, everything. That costs a lot more money, a lot more time, and is quite unnecessary in my opinion. We've been doing this for many years, and meshing over just regular drywall doesn't really make much sense. Obviously, if you're in exteriors, adding EFS mesh over your brown coat or anything like that is a great idea. But for regular installs here, you do not need mesh everywhere in your project. You will see later we do mesh the entire floor, however, and we did mesh all of those specific areas in the shower. Here's a little time-lapse video showing the mixing. Here we're mixing the base coat, wall, and shower. We're doing the first coat on the walls. I don't measure the water out. I usually put a little water in the bottom of the bucket, then add some of the plaster in, add a little bit more, mix it. I just mix it to eye until it's the right consistency. If I do places on the wall and it's a little bit thick and it's a little too hard to use, then I will just remix it a little bit. Or if it's thin, you can always just add a little bit more plaster as well to the product. Here we're seeing the final coat on the walls. We've skipped over a lot of things. I didn't want to make this video too long, and we cover in great detail the wall and shower system in the other videos there. So this is just kind of pulling all of the systems together and also showing the floor system for the first time. Again, we have multiple people working here. We'll always have the same amount of people that we have working on one wall. We're not going to split them up. This protects from joint lines and also, allows everyone to apply onto the wall. One person can come back, burnish, tighten it up, make it look nice, so no parts are missed. Here the lighting's a bit harsh and overhead because the lights aren't set into the ceiling properly. So again, you're seeing some of that mesh Again, if you're meshing all your walls, you do run into the issue of having more lumps and bumps in your walls. That particular wall there, once we applied the last 2 top coats, if you do it very carefully and don't follow those lumps and bumps, you can completely remove them and you'll see it looks absolutely perfect in the final videos there. I just wanted to mention too, with the floor, so before we primed that floor, you saw Kevin sanding all of the drywall and things off the floor. That's, you know, all those can act as bond breakers. So we wanted to sand the floor first before priming. Then again, after we rolled the 8+9 onto the floor, we added 2 more layers of Ardex 8+9 waterproofing over the K60 just for further crack prevention. And then we also meshed over top of this floor, and there's an uncoupling membrane underneath the K62. So the chances of ever having cracks on this floor at this point are pretty much 0 unless the house kind of cracks in half. You saw Kevin there sanding the 8+9. Again, that was just to remove any bond breakers there. Then applying the mesh, and then we mixed up our base coat floor. And this goes on very easily over the mesh. All you have to do is just get it in there, push it down into all those holes and cracks and create a nice even layer. You're not going to have any issues with joint lines here or the product drying into anything. It's going to stay wet and very easy to work with. This is a little different from what you'll see on the next coats, and we'll explain that. But for this particular coat, it's pretty hard to go wrong as long as you keep it quite even and make sure that you're not leaving a lot of pinholes. Make sure that it's fully pressed in, and you see I'm going left and then right, and that ensures that you're hitting those honeycombs from both angles in the EFS mesh. This is the mesh that we have as well. It's an adhesive mesh, so it makes life a lot easier. You can just stick it down to the floor and then plaster straight over top of it. There will be, again, a few little lumps and bumps in this. Definitely a few areas are going to poke out and stick up because trying to get the mesh completely stuck down perfectly is almost impossible because it is quite flexible and different places kind of bend and stick up. So you'll see there's a few little ridges there. We'll come back after and sand those out and also scrape them back. And then you'll see as well, we do a priming layer, so we'll kind of add a little base coat over top of each of those and let it set up before we do our second base coat. We also protect the floor, especially when we're doing the final coats on the walls and the ceilings, so you don't want to get a lot of your microcement wall fine all over that floor. So the whole floor is protected, drop sheeted. Every time that we're working on those walls and ceilings, that floor is protected. The color of this particular product is our color 20 or 21. I'll have to look at the Microcement color chart here in just a second. So I just checked, so it's color 21 on the Microcement color chart for the Microcement wall and shower fine here. You could use extra fine as well, but they wanted a little bit more sandy finish. So there's no marble powder kind of hiding the beautiful yellow sand grains that we use, and you get that nice sandy warmth, kind of a Mediterranean look. Color 21 has about 5% titanium dioxide, a natural titanium dioxide that we use and add into the product. It comes in a powder form, and you want to dilute that very well in water first. Do not add it direct to the product, else it will streak and you'll have kind of white sections in different places and less white sections in other places. We did attempt to sand this floor a little bit just for fun to see if it would do anything, but the product's so hard the sander basically did absolutely nothing. So we just gave it a light little sand just to take off any little dags and little lumps and bumps and things like that. But ultimately, there's not much you can do to that base coat after. You just want to take a very strong putty knife and scrape any of the ridges down that are kind of pushing up with that 8X mesh. Other than that, the primary focus is always just protecting that floor if you're working on top of it from getting too much plaster falling onto it. So here we're using the flexible base coat trowel, again, the steel trowel, and this is the second base coat. This is where you can kind of mess up a little bit because you want to make sure that all that mesh is covered, you're not having little lumps and bumps. So these protrusions in the mesh, we just pour a little bit on there after we scrape them back and add that over top. That's gonna set up in 5 or 10 minutes. The time we get to those areas, the base coat's gonna overlay over those, and then you're not gonna have any issues. This, you can see the final version of the base coat floor there. It's got that nice little burnish on it. It's all nice and smooth. Looks just like the walls. This product, we see a lot of people, I think, mix it too thick. It's not meant to be mixed like a plaster. For floors, you want it very thin. If you use a regular microcement product that's designed for walls and floors combined, they do have special additives in them that make them very easy to work with. They do spread a lot more easily as well and stay wet longer, but that also decreases their PSI strength quite a bit. So this is why I've decided to break the floor system up into 2 different systems. And then if you want the Microcement synergy, you can bring all of it together. But as you can see here, if you pair the fine floor with the fine wall, there's not a big difference at all in the look. Once you've laid down the base coat floor second coat, and you're ensuring that it's, you know, wet enough to work with, we come back, and this is probably only, you know, 15-20 minutes after we've applied the whole area. So basically the time that we're done, we kind of hop over there, and I've already got the boys sponging out all of the base coat. This kind of sponges and closes up any little pinholes, and then we can also give it a final burnish as well. So you can hop onto that floor without shoes. You can use just your socks or tape sponges to your feet if you don't want to get your socks wet. And yeah, sponge the whole floor out and then give it a nice little burnish. Here we're showing mixing the titanium dioxide. So I measured out the 50% titanium dioxide. So if you have 20 kilograms, that would be 1 kilogram of titanium dioxide. We then dilute it in about 1 liter of water, ensure it's fully diluted. Then we proceed to add in the Microcement wall fine, and then we start mixing. If it's really thick, I just pour in a little bit more water. Again, I'm not checking the exact ratios here. I just do everything to eye. Yeah, we're continuing to mix. And I just incrementally add the water in. Now you saw that we used an original drill there, so that's a professional drill that's got a low RPM for mixing plasters, but for these particular things you want to switch to a high RPM hammer drill once it's smooth enough that it's not going to burn the motor out. And we always switch to that. If you just use a low RPM, it's not going to mix the product enough and you're going to have streaking and some lumps in the product. So to get it extremely smooth and easy to work with, you want to kind of whip it up so it's almost like a custard before you start to lay this product down. This will make it a lot easier. Please do not mix it too thick, else you're just going to make it, you know, difficult for yourself to apply the product. So if you may have noticed, we've switched to the plastic medium trowels here. I believe the 1.5 millimeter for application. They're a little bit stiffer than the 1 mil, but it can depend on the circumstance. We find the 1 millimeter medium plastic trowels apply the top coats very nicely for the Microcement floor. For the Microcement wall system, the 1.5 mil seems to work a little bit better, just a little bit stiffer. So here we did, you know, the base coats on the floor, the walls, the ceiling. Then we ensured that we finished up the ceiling first, then we finished the walls with the top coats, and then obviously we're going to do the floor last as well. So make sure that you're not finishing your floor before all the other areas are finished. That's very important when you design your install. As you can see, the plaster here is a lot finer, creamier, a lot more white due to the titanium dioxide, and this is just the first layer That drain there too, we took that drain out every single time and then cleared it all out and, you know, rubbed our finger in there. But it was such a tight fit, that drain, that we didn't put much plaster right onto the inside. We just left the 8+9 and then sealed over top of it. Because if we put much plaster in there, or if you just took the drain out and didn't think about it and plastered all in there and put too much plaster, then your drain just wouldn't fit and it would be impossible to put your grate in after. So here you can see we're using the plastic trowels. We're just pouring the microcement floor down. This layer is probably the hardest layer to get right because you've got so much absorption now from 2 layers of base coat that it's going to absorb quite a bit. You could put water on the floor, but for us, we don't normally do that. We just make sure that the product is mixed to quite a fluid consistency. We pour it down and we just work it back and forth, pushing that ribbon back and forth. A little bit different technique than you're seeing on the walls there. Again, we hopped back onto the floor, sponged the whole floor out, and then continued to burnish and tighten it all up with plastic trowels. Today is one of the days where there was no electricity, so we actually had a huge floodlight set up outside, so that's why the imagery looks a little bit unusual. There you can see the ceiling is all finished with the wall and shower. We got 1 coat of fine on the floor. Excuse me. And now we're going to be finishing the walls. So the ceiling's finished. Now the walls are getting all finished with the last coat of the tinted color 21 microcement fine wall and shower. And then we're going to finalize the last layer on the floor. So then everything's all finished, tidied up. Now this is very important. You don't want to be lazy here. You want to take all this site protection off before you start sealing, remask back a little bit and re-protect. If you just seal over top of that, then you're going to run the risk of the polyseal not getting right down into all those edges and not sealing that edge properly. And when you put your oil on, the oil actually is going to find all those raw edges and draw up and kind of stain that little area there. Also, you're just not going to get a good amount of sealer in all those areas. So you want this sealer to come right down onto the stone. So clean up, take everything off, chip everything away, take all the tape off and remask back about 1/2 mil. And then you can start to seal after. So once all that protection was done, here we're using the small and medium 1 mil. We've got the last layer down on the microcement floor. And here we're just tidying everything up. Like I said, while the product's still wet, it does set up. This is another benefit of having it formulated in this particular way. It dries quite quick and sets up enough that you can get on top of it and polish it all out. Now here's the next day. So we go around, we sand all of the externals, we sanded the floor so it's super smooth, we sanded any little nicks and dags and things everywhere. Now a lot of systems, they're recommending sanding everything everywhere, every coat. That's completely unnecessary. When I learned how to drywall in Australia as well, they don't sand any of the coats. So here they sand their drywall, even every layer too. But it is completely, unnecessary. Just a little bit of sanding here and there. Even the last coat didn't need to be sanded, but it just makes sure that there's no little, like if you seal over a tiny little rock or something that's just kind of sitting on the surface, then that can kind of peel off. So you want to make sure that there's nothing like that on the surface before you seal. Now the sealer protocol for this, we did a polyseal diluted 1:1. Then we did 1 layer of polyseal followed by a layer of poly WB. All of that dried and cured overnight. Then we came back the next day and applied the high wear in 1 layer. And then the next day we came back, took everything down, cleaned everything up, and applied just the silicone everywhere. So we're using a microfiber roller there for the sealer. The microfiber just holds a little bit more product. That's a 10 mil microfiber. If you really have something a little bit heavier in texture, you can certainly move up to a 13 mil. Those types of things can just be your personal preference, but I do find the microfibers 10 or 13 mil to be very suited to applying the poly seal in particular. Poly WB, once you've done the poly seal, I believe using the 13 mil on the fine for the first diluted layer of poly seal is what we used because it was so dry and absorbing so much. I think we used like 8 liters of diluted poly seal to seal this. Then we switched to the 10 mil for the undiluted poly seal and then stuck with the 10 mil as well for the poly WB. You'll see the poly WB has a lot more body to it. You see how that's fully protecting the product there. So once you get the poly seal on, moving to the poly WB just gives a much harder finish. It seals the pores a lot more, and it's going to protect that much more from the color enhancement of the high wear trying to get through and color enhance your product. Ideally, for the most benefit, it's best to do the poly seal one day, let that fully cure, then do the poly WB the next day, and then the high wear. So taking 3 full days to seal the spa is the most ideal situation. And if you really wanted to be professional, you could even do, a diluted 1-to-1 poly seal and then 2 coats of undiluted poly seal the first day, then 1 poly WB, and finally the high wear. Again, you're building these areas to last for a lifetime ideally, and we don't want to rush anything and cut any corners. The poly seal does not have much smell or anything to it. The poly WB certainly has quite a bit more VOC than even the high wear. So you want to just make sure that you have a window or a door cracked open a little bit or wear a mask. It is very low VOC, but it's still, has more fumes than the other products that we use. And there we were just finally rolling the high wear on. Again, we've covered the high wear in other videos. We're in there the next day, demasking, removing everything. So here's the final high wear application on the ceiling. We're using a 10 mil, not a microfiber, but we're using a non-lint. The microfiber, because the oil is so thick, it will pull the microfiber out onto the actual ceiling or walls that you're working on. I really prefer the high wear over anything, although the poly WB is a nice finish. It doesn't consolidate the product in the same way. So once this oil goes on, it completely fills any voids, it gets rid of any roller marks, any lines, and just makes the entire wall, ceiling, and floor feel like one unique piece. It also provides the absolute best mold and fungi and bacteria protection. It's fully chemical resistant. The specs on it just really can't be beat. And a lot of your mold and mildew just doesn't grow in it as well, so it stays a lot more clean. And I hear from a lot of people that they only clean these areas maybe once every 6 months. There you want to make sure that you clean any of the oil and the high wear out from that plastic drain. Again, checking to make sure that your drain fits. You can see the oil also really highlights all of those beautiful natural movements in the product. A lot of that is just kind of the sand grains showing through. There's not enough titanium dioxide to completely white out that product, so it has a nice sandy Mediterranean look. And again, like I said, with that high wear, it just produces the most beautiful satin shine. It's got the aluminum oxide in there, which is as hard as diamonds, and really gives you a solid finish there for your protection. Once that was all dried, we came back the next day, we applied all the silicone, and we protected that floor for the builder as well until they were ready to do a final clean.